What we really, really want to emphasize is that financing your education has to be a goal. And I don't want my daughter or my son to face that, same reality.
College degree that currently costs 25 lakhs in India will eventually cost almost 1 crore in just 15 years.
I started looking at this subgroup of Anganwadi workers, and there are women that are earning, right? They have a little bit of disposable income. How do we teach them to become slightly more financially aware?
Are the salaries of families, household income in a year also increasing at par with the increase in the cost of education? If there's one thing that all parents want for their kids, it's a good quality education. Our guest today has built a company that enables more and more parents to give their kids just that. Eela Dubey is a third-generation immigrant who grew up in New York, America. She graduated from New York University with honors in political science and French. But post-graduation, her career took a turn when she landed in Wall Street, followed by working for an investment advisory firm and eventually founding her company, EduFund. EduFund was founded in 2020 during the pandemic. The goal of the company is to help parents become more aware of the cost of their kids' education and then build a roadmap to reach there. EduFund is India's first education-focused investment app. Eela and her co-founder have raised more than $5.5 million for their startup and currently have a thriving base in India with 50 full-time employees. And just so far, they've helped more than 200,000 parents with their kids' education. I had a wonderful time on this. I hope you do as well. Eela Dubey, ladies and gentlemen. So, Eela, on your website, you say that a college degree that currently costs 25 lakhs in India will eventually cost almost 1 crore in just 15 years. I mean, that's a jump of more than 2.5 every 10 years. And I'm curious, what do you think is causing this big jump?
Well, first of all, Soundarya, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to chat about a few topics that are very dear to my heart and I love. But yes, coming to your question, you are correct. This is assuming a 10% inflation rate every year for a domestic education in India. That is what we estimate at EduFund the rising costs of education to be year on year, anywhere between 10 to 12%. Now, why is this happening? Why are costs going up so precipitously? One of the reasons that I feel very, very strongly about is this movement of privatizing schools and the education system in India, right? I think over the last 20, 30 years, probably compared to our parents' time, we're seeing this massive shift, both, I would say, at a infra level, where you're seeing the rise of tons of private schools, private colleges, but also in the psychology and the psyche of the parents, right? It's almost like a tale as old as time. You put more money towards something and you expect better output and quality. And because these private schools are unaided, right? Your parents are paying 2, 3 lakhs for primary school, etc. I think there's this association that if you pay more, my kid gets a better quality of education versus probably the thought that some parents now have. And I'm not saying that I believe this, but I think because there is such a shift, there are a lot of parents that are starting to believe that a government education is probably not sufficient enough in terms of infra, in terms of admin, in terms of quality of the teacher. So there's a lot of really interesting data. I was reading a UNESCO report recently. It's dated to 2022, but they were saying out of the 97,000 schools that have opened up since 2014, 69,000, so roughly 70% of them are private schools, which is just insane. And they did a survey, I think, of 4,000 parents, 4 or 5,000 parents in about 8 cities. And they actually found that a majority, I think, or over 50% of them preferred to send their children to a budget private school. And these are, by the way, low income families. I'm not talking about middle or high upper class Indian families. These are fairly low income families. So yeah, I think you're seeing this massive shift towards privatizing education, which means now, hey, there's not massive caps or massive ceilings on what this education could cost. And this is happening across both the school level, so the primary, the secondary, the tertiary levels, including, higher education. And that same survey that I was referring to found that about 70% of parents now prefer to send their kids to a private school. So I think that's one big macro reason that we're seeing across India. I think, the second is just hyper competition, right? Not everyone's child's going to get into an IIT, or, a lauded government school that's, being subsidized. And that's then pushing these parents to think outside. And yeah, your average engineering college in India now for 4 years could cost anywhere from 10 lakhs to 25, 30 lakhs. I mean, I know the spread is fairly large, but that's what we're talking about today.
Hmm. You said this is across low income families, which is interesting. And in your definition, what is low income?
So I think this varies person to person, and also research organization to research organization. I've seen a lot of data, though, that many people generally align that middle income can hover anywhere from 8 to 40 lakhs in India, right? And within that, and again, it's a very big spread, but within that, of course, there are pockets that are still considered higher income, right? But I think anything hovering in that range, and also from the data that we see interacting with the parents and the families, we do because we get to see some of this information ourselves. I would say that's an accurate estimation, definitely. I think anything below that, you probably are less inclined to think about putting your disposable income towards an investment. You're probably just thinking of day-to-day expenses, right? You're probably not thinking of spending 2 lakhs a year for primary school education. But again, I'm not an economist, so just putting that disclaimer out, but this is a lot of what, we've seen and we've interacted with.
Because I was going to ask, it sounds like the cost of education is increasing because there's more and more private players in the industry who can see that there's a lot of demand, and so they can price it higher, which also to parents makes it sound like higher price means higher quality. So I understand that. But are the salaries of families, household income in a year also increasing at par with the increase in the cost of education?
I don't think that they're rising commensurately, to be honest. And again, these are anecdotes that I hear from some of the students that, we interact with from time to time. But, there are some students coming out of really fantastic business schools that are still earning wages that I know of students coming out of business school 5 to 7 years ago, right? So I definitely think anecdotally, but also empirically from some of the cases that we've seen at least, that house or income is not rising faster than inflation in some of these cases. I think the cost of that education is not necessarily in all cases yielding the salaries that a lot of students thought they would be getting afterwards, right? And really funny story, but I happened to be reading a magazine from the time someone in my family was getting their master's degree, and this was 2010, 2011. And it was one of those paper magazines, by the way. But they were considering an MBA at that time. They ended up not doing an MBA and pursuing another degree, but they ended up, thinking about an MBA, and they were looking at MBA salaries. And this is in the US for context, looking at MBA salaries post graduating 2011, 2012. And something said, top MBA from X school. I won't name school, but they walked out with $140,000, right? $150,000. When I know students that are graduating from top B schools that are walking away with that much today, right? So I think it just goes to show that things are not aligning in some cases.
Okay. Is that the thesis for EduFund, that you want to help parents save for their kids' education, even the parents who might think I don't have the disposable income enough to pay for my kids' education, but if you do it over 10 years, 20 years, you actually do. Is that the rough thesis?
Yes, absolutely. I think the what we really, really want to emphasize is that financing your education has to be a goal that you have, and it's very necessary to adequately plan. We're not promising you that we're going to get you to the best MBBS school. We're not promising you that you're going to go abroad. What we're trying to say is we're going to enable you to try to get to where you want to be. If that is X, we're going to work with you to tell you, is this possible? And if it's not possible, here are the next five best options for you, right, to pursue. Because at the end of the day, yeah, some of these schools or colleges come with a really, really big price tag, Soundarya. And a lot of families underestimate the cost that it could potentially be, right? And I'm not talking about, you know, just families who've never had access to this information to understand a education abroad is X or MBBS is going to cost X in 10 years. I'm talking about some families that themselves have even gotten some of these degrees or gone abroad and are now saying, oh, we didn't realize that it's actually going to be 2X compared to what we estimated, right? And that changes where you are mentally and how you plan, right? It could definitely impact that goal. So what we say is wherever you are in that life cycle, we want to work with you and figure out that plan. And yes, if you start early, there are definitely ways to save and invest and make a huge impact, but no family, no person is going to be the same. And that's how we look at all of our families that we work with.
Right. And okay, so the families come to you and say that my goal is to get my kid into, I I would assume almost every family would say, I'd like to get my kid into the top school. No one's going to say, get my kid into tier 3 or tier 4 schools, right? And so,
Yeah, absolutely. Just like every parent wants their child to go to IAT, right? Everyone I know prepared for the JEE exam, and obviously the reality turned out to be very different. But yes, that is the aspiration, and Indian families are highly aspirational. So yes.
yeah. And do you specifically work with them towards a bachelor's or a master's? And this is all within India, correct?
Yes. So we're focused on India only in terms of our clients are based in India only. We don't bias, again, just like we don't say you must go abroad or you must stay in India. We don't bias against the degree either. We say you could come to us and have UG in mind. Let's plan for UG. You could have a master's in mind. Let's plan for a master's. You could even want to plan for your child's school fees for the next 5, 10 years. We'll help you do that.
What have you seen that's the most popular, reason that someone comes to you?
Precisely that they want to give their child a safety net in terms of their future. And there was a lot of lost opportunity by these parents themselves, right? A lot of families come to us saying, hey, I didn't get this opportunity to pursue this degree. My parents couldn't afford it. And I actually had to sacrifice on my desire or dream to do this. And I don't want my daughter or my son to face that, same reality. Or I am witnessing now firsthand the costs of raising a child, maybe in a metro city, maybe in a tier 2 city. It's no longer what it used to be, and I need to be prepared so that they don't have to sacrifice on this dream, or at least I get them one step closer to giving them that choice, right? That's very important.
And when they come to you, is it you've helped more than 200,000 people in some capacity through your community? That is a very, very, very large number. So have most of them come for a bachelor's degree or for a master's? Do you see a clear pattern there?
I do. So what's really interesting is a lot of these families are coming to us to plan for undergraduate education. And I think this is really the first time that I am seeing such a macro shift from PG, which I think India has historically been, at least for abroad, a PG planning market. Now it's very different. Parents are realizing that just the graduation degree, as we like to call it, is so expensive. I mean, no one thought they'd be paying 20 lakhs for 4 years of engineering. It's insane. Or 30, 40 lakhs for, a liberal arts degree. So yeah, very interesting. But the trend, I think, is definitely shifting.
And UG, I'm assuming UG in India, at least
Mhm.
primarily. And What's the average timeline? How far before do the parents come to you to plan for their kids' usually? Is it 5 years before, 7 years before, just an average?
It's around 8 to 10 years, which I think is pretty remarkable because if you are trying to save and invest, that's a fantastic timeline for you to actually make a dent in your investment portfolio, right? I mean, that is the long-term saving game. And personally, I'm very proud to see that happen.
Why did you and your co-founder choose India as a market? Because you were born in the US, in New York. You went to NYU. So was it, yeah, did you plan out that this is always going to be an India-focused company? Or we'll start from India and then we'll expand to other places?
Yeah, I think, both my co-founder and I have, so my co-founder is actually from India. I have deep ancestral ties to India. And I think this, the importance of an education is a very Indian thing, right? I mean, the aspiration for all our families, whether it's Indians or the Indian diaspora, is बच्चे को पढ़ाना है, right? I mean, there is that association with knowledge and wisdom. There's a cultural import, but also I think we have seen a very, very clear-cut case that in a country like India, education provides mobility, right? It provides socioeconomic mobility. It could change the future of a child's life. I mean, it changed my family's life. My grandfather came to this country um, on a scholarship to get his education. And he had the privilege of settling down. But look at how that changed Sondaria, the lives of so many generations henceforth. And I'm not saying it's just an abroad thing. It happens in India too, right? And so I think for us, because of our ties, but because we knew how much education can change the lives of families, um, it was just it was clear. Like India was the market. A country like India needs it, and with costs going up so much, Indians traditionally being a country of household savers, we are a country of very, very strong household savers still. It was just obvious. It was a no-brainer.
When you say household savers, do you mean that even if EduFund didn't exist right now in the market, India is still a country where parents save for their kids' education? Is that what you meant by that?
Um, yes and no. So what I mean by household savings is we are a country that has put money away somewhere on our balance sheet. I'm not necessarily talking about financial assets. It could be in gold, physical asset. It could be in real estate, right? Today, FDs are a lot more prominent, but we've tried to be a country, I think, from what I've seen, that has been uh, balance sheet saving rich, right? And today you see a little bit of that changed. We've gone towards more financial assets, but we've stayed in our physical assets for sure. But I think that psyche has also passed down generation to generation, right? And I remember this growing up as a third generation American, a lot of aversion to debt, like let's be very mindful of how much we take out in loans, how much debt we take. It's important to save, it's important to pay off. And I definitely think this is a cultural thing that's passed down. The actual semantics of it look very different, today. But yeah, I still believe that Indians very saving rich in our mind.
I can 1000% attest to that because it's, as you were speaking, I was just thinking of obviously my family and the way my parents and my father thinks. And it's very, very saving prone, as
Mhm.
opposed to America, where it's very spending prone. And I know this because I actually, when I was at Columbia, I worked on this case study where we were supposed to look at the overdraft fees. Overdraft is what you pay if you don't pay your credit card bills. It's called the overdraft fee. And so the amount of fee that people pay there,
Insane.
it's in billions of dollars every year. And I was like,
Yeah.
it'd be so interesting to see because back then credit cards were not even a thing in India. And I'm talking 7 years
No.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even today, I feel like I have to look at the data, but I still don't see people really using a credit card as much as they have Paytm and other such products that they use. But you're spot on in that. And that actually kind of brings me to this. You've lived in both the US and now India. You are based out of Ahmedabad, as you said. I'm sure you had culture shocks. I had when I went from India to US. So, what were a few funny, surprising, shocking shocks that you felt when you came to India?
In terms of work or in terms of living here?
Let's start with living here because I think that's more fun.
Soundarya, I don't think I had that many culture shocks living in India because growing up, I was definitely one of those, kids whose parents brought them to India every year to make sure that they were very closely aligned with their culture. And I would say, the root of my inspiration to start EduFund really came from that, is seeing a lot of the inequalities that existed here. So it wasn't really a huge culture shock in terms of living. I speak Hindi fluently. I used to spend all my summer vacations, like 3 months every year. So that wasn't a culture shock. I was used to it. I think the only culture shock was when I learned how to drive on the left side of the road.
Can you
That
do that
was a big,
right now?
yes, I can. Yes, yes. So I'm driving. I was like, I'm done with taking Ubers. I'm going to invest in a vehicle. So I was very desi. I got a Maruti and everything. So I'm driving now, which is probably the biggest culture shock because I'm not used to honking a horn, if I'm
Yeah.
honest. So yeah, not a lot of culture shocks, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I think professionally, I had a lot more culture shocks because I was kind of bred in this culture of work culture in the US, but that too in New York, right? So college was in New York. My first career was in New York, and New York is kind of like Bombay. Like they go, 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 they work hard. So that was a really interesting shift. Like I remember someone told me, well, the office hours are like 10 to 7 here. And I was like, what? Really? Like I started my day at 7:30 in the US. So that was a big, big shock, and seeing how far people commuted, especially in the metro cities, right? In Bombay today, the average commute is 45 minutes to an hour one way. And I was like, I bow down to people who do that because they really hustle. Like Indians, and that was the other thing. Indians really hustle. At least the ones that I've had the privilege of interacting with and working with, they really hustle. And startup culture here, I think really people work tremendously hard because they also have a lot more, to lose. And so I would say, yeah, it's a culture shock that's also led to a lot of respect. Um, but then there are other, I think, situations of, you get calls the day before someone's supposed to join and they're not showing up. I was like, what? I seriously, but apparently it happens
Right.
more often than we think.
Did you also feel any culture shocks? Because you were in New York, not just New York, you were in Wall Street. You worked there for some time. And so is there a thriving startup culture in Ahmedabad right now?
Growing, actually. It's not what I would have expected. I would have thought that we were one of the few people that, incorporated and established there, but no, there's actually a growing startup culture. And I think, Gujaratis are traditionally known as the business people of India. And so there's this vibrant business culture. And I think you're seeing this shift from traditional businesses to now more startups. But yeah, there is a thriving culture. There's a company that anyone who's interested in startups, I think, should check out. It's called eChai. It was started by Jatin Chaudhary and his co-founder. He started out of Ahmedabad, and effectively what he's trying to do is just give people a platform to have a dialogue on startups and startup adjacent topics. And he brings together founders, and now he's gone global. I mean, you have this mass effect of now people coming together under the name of chai and having conversations. And so for me, that's given me a really nice community of people to interact with.
To ask actually, are there any specific websites or places that people can go check to join community? So eChai is what you mentioned.
Chai,
You
yeah.
also you have gotten many fellowships, but the one that I saw recently was by the Reliance Foundation and the Vital Voices Group. And so I'm curious, how do you find these fellowships? And anything that you can tell people who are listening to this as to go here and check for fellowships?
I did my due diligence, honestly, Soundarya. I was one of those Google Baba people and was like, fellowships for women, you know. But I felt that I was at a place in my professional career and also as a founder that I think a fellowship could add a lot of value to my professional journey. And so I started, doing my fair share of research. This was one that came top of mind. There's another one by the Aspen Institute. I have a few friends that are Aspen fellows. I forget the exact name, but they have an India dedicated fellowship for business individuals. So that was another one I had looked at. But I think why, the Reliance Foundation and the Vital Voices one really stood out to me is because they were working in the realm of social impact. And definitely while I am a businesswoman, I would like to think at the end of the day, what we're trying to do through education and giving people that financial strength is really, is doing social good at the end of the day. And so I really liked what they had to offer and I applied. And now I'm very lucky to be a part of a cohort of 50 women doing some absolutely insane things in the space. But one thing that really also inspired me to do as part of my fellowship is take up a project in the social impact space. And, you know, one thing that I felt very strongly about is that women, especially in India, um, are not investing and are not financially literate to the extent that men are. And we're very disproportionately disadvantaged in a lot of ways. And I started looking at this, subgroup of Anganwadi workers. And, there are women that are earning, right? They have a little bit of disposable income. How do we teach them to become slightly more financially aware and save and invest? And so, as part of this, I've taken up a project to work hopefully with about 500 Anganwadi women and teach them how to do small sips every month.
What does Anganwadi mean?
So it's a group of women basically that the government has, I would say they pay or, officially they give them a wage to take care of effectively the communities nearby. So they get to take care of children in the local school system. For women, they serve to educate them around the time that they're pregnant. So they're kind of the communal mom.
Oh, so they're women who help other women or their communities.
And children, yes, yes. And they serve as a force of education, actually. So when it comes to like public health, when it comes to medicine, when it comes to their children going to school and getting educated. So they're the communal mom that have information, right? And literature to educate, yeah, families and children.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about helping parents and how they can invest better and how your company helps with that. I'm curious about how you personally think about investment as well, of just, your own financial literacy and where did you learn that? And how do you think about investing your money for not just your kids, but just in for yourself?
I first learned about investing when I started my first job, which also happened to be in, the financial asset management space. My background was not money. So I want to be very clear that I studied, politics and French, which are so far from studying finance and management and anything remotely close. And I think like a lot of people, I had this reservation that I can't invest. I don't know what the stock market is. I don't know what a share is. What is, a ticker price? How do I track month on month growth? I was like, this is not me. I'm not supposed to know this. My first job happened by complete serendipity. And I'm very glad that it did, because I think the one thing I took away from that experience is that everyone needs to learn about money, no matter how complicated or uncomplicated it may seem. It is such a fundamental part of our life that we shouldn't shy away from it, right? And yes, I understand that finance and financial jargon may go over people's head and seem really intimidating, but it's your right to know, right? If you are paying someone even 5 rupees for something, it's your right to know. If you're earning 5 rupees from someone, it's your right to know where to put that money away. And so that experience, my first job, really taught me about investing in financial markets, what a stock was, what a mutual fund was, what an ETF was, and where as a young person I should think about having asset allocation exposure. And because I was young, because I still like to think I'm relatively young, an obvious asset class for us was mutual funds and stocks, right? Because you have such a long window to invest, right? And this could be an emergency fund, it could be saving for a rainy day. If I decide to have children, it could be, saving for their future. But I think that was, very, very obvious. Now, it also depends on your goal, Soundarya. Like, I mean, what you want to invest for. Maybe you want to learn how to become a day trader. I don't know. That's your prerogative, but I think you really have to be clear on what the goal and intent was. I was very clear about mine, that I am a career professional and I'm probably not going to have time to day trade and look at the stock market and ticker prices all day. So I just created a bunch of long-term goals and I started investing in mutual funds and stocks and getting exposure to the market. And there are a ton of platforms, including ours, that make that super accessible to do. And that's what I did.
Can you mention maybe three, four, how many other websites or tools that people can use that they can go check out after this podcast so that they can put this into practice?
So I would say EduFund. Sorry, shameless marketing. But at least for mutual funds, we don't give our families access to invest in stocks. It's not an asset class that we want them to have exposure to because we want them really long-term focused. But yeah, there are tons of platforms. I think, Zerodha is a good one. They have Zerodha Kite. I'm not sure if they're running Kite anymore. I assume they are, but that was their financial literacy angle from where a lot of people, learned. Grow is another really popular one. All of these do a lot of financial literacy, including ourselves. We publish blogs regularly, we do YouTube videos. I think if you are confused on where to start, it's first important to educate yourself before you go and open up an account. It could be as simple as, Googling what a stock is, what a mutual fund is, what are passive funds? What's a fund manager? What is a ticker price? And then when you feel confident, definitely then move forward with the other operational bits of opening up an account. But look, India has plenty of platforms, including ours. It's just a question of doing research and also making sure the other thing is, they're licensed and legitimate.
Gotcha. We'll put all the platforms that you just mentioned in the description as well. As a last question, I'm curious if you could go back by 5 years because you started EduFund around the pandemic, right? 2020. Exactly, in the pandemic. So going back 5 years, you're giving an advice to a young Eela who's just starting out. What would you tell her?
I would say just stay at it. The journey is not going to be easy. It is a very lonely journey, if I'm being honest, but continue par for course and keep your head up and just keep going. Yeah, I'm not going to say that there's some magical quote or magical piece of advice that I would give myself that would change this journey. The journey is very raw, it's very emotional. There's a lot of growth, there's a lot of learning, but it's my journey. And just stay at it, par for course. Keep going. Just keep swimming, Nemo.
Oh man, I love Pixar. Is there any way in which the audience can support you guys? Obviously, I think anyone who's listening who's a parent should first go check EduFund and see how they can work with you to save for their kids' education. Is there any other way in which we can support you?
I would just say my advice to families is don't wait to start. A lot of parents come to us and say, आगे चल के देखेंगे, बाद में देखेंगे. I know what I'm doing. And then they later realize that actually, oops, they don't have enough, or oops, they should have planned better. You don't lose anything by starting to do your research. You don't lose anything by, checking out the costs today. We have a cost calculator on our platform that families can look into, and you don't lose anything by checking out the cost and seeing what the reality is. That doesn't hurt you, and then yeah, you have a forecast of what the damage is going to be and whether you're on track or not. And I would say don't wait to start. don't, do good things early, as my grandfather always tells me.
That's a beautiful statement. We'll also put the cost calculator below in the description. But fantastic. Eela, thanks for waking up at 6 a.m. EST for this.
Thank you for having me.
Really appreciate that. Thanks so much. Okay, I really hope you enjoyed that. And before you go, as a small giveaway, I'm giving away 2 copies of Eela's favorite book on investing, A Random Walk Down Wall Street. To enter the contest, all you have to do is visit go.1000daysoflove.com/giveaway or check the link in description and enter your name and email. And that's all you have to do. We'll be picking people at random and then sending you an email. Until next time, thank you and take care.